Stress physiology, the real cause, symptoms, and management of acid reflux that we misunderstood. Hi, everyone. This is Real Easy Med Terms. In this session, we will learn about stress physiology, the real cause, symptoms, and management of acid reflux that we misunderstood. Chapter 7. The difference between the esophageal mucosa and the gastric mucosa, and Chapter 8. Reasons for lowering gastric acid pH and increasing gastric acid secretion. Chapter 7. The difference between the esophageal mucosa and the gastric mucosa. When gastric acid is secreted, the pH is 1.8. 1.8 is the second strongest acid after hydrochloric acid. Since gastric acid is a strong acid, if a hole is made in the stomach and the stomach acid leaks out and reaches other intestines, the intestines melt. For this reason, when stomach acid reaches the esophagus corrodes and swells red. However, even if such strong stomach acid is secreted 1 to 2 liters a day, the stomach wall is generally intact. This is because two barriers protect the stomach wall from gastric acid. One is the physical barrier formed by mucus and the other is the chemical barrier formed by bicarbonate. First, a thick layer of mucus secreted by mucus cells in the stomach wall covers the surface of the stomach wall, physically blocking the stomach wall from gastric acid. Along with this, alkaline bicarbonate is secreted to protect the stomach wall by chemically neutralizing stomach acid. Parietal cells that secrete gastric acid have a slightly alkaline pH of about 7.2 inside the membrane. The reason is that, when gastric acid is secreted from the parietal cells of the stomach, water is ionized and hydrogen ions are secreted into gastric juice, and the remaining hydroxide ions combine with carbon dioxide to form bicarbonate, and are excreted into the interstitial fluid. Bicarbonate that is released into the interstitial fluid does not dissolve the stomach wall as strongly as hydrochloric acid, because it combines with hydrogen ions and becomes carbonic acid, which is weaker than gastric acid. However, the wall of the esophagus does not have a strong protective barrier like the wall of the stomach. The wall of the esophagus also secretes mucus and bicarbonate, but the amount is small and the secretion is slow, so the esophageal wall cannot avoid the invasion of gastric acid. Furthermore, when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, the secretion ability of the digestive system decreases, so the mucus layers of the stomach and esophagus become thinner, making them more vulnerable to invasion of gastric acid. In addition, when there is chronic stress, the pH of the gastric acid itself is lowered and the secretion of bicarbonate is reduced, so the pH of the gastric juice is also lowered, which stimulates the esophagus more strongly when the gastric acid reflux into the esophagus. Chapter 8. Reasons for lowering gastric acid pH and increasing gastric acid secretion. The reason the acidity of stomach acid and the secretion of gastric acid are increased is because the intake of acidic foods has increased or the production of acidic substances in the metabolic process has increased. Most of the foods we eat are acidic, especially in the order of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. In addition, various acidic substances such as carbonic acid, lactic acid, uric acid, keto acid, phosphoric acid, and sulfuric acid are generated in the metabolic process of the human body. Among them, ketone bodies, a type of keto acid, have the greatest effect on acidifying body fluids. When fat is broken down, it becomes glycerol and fatty acids. Glycerol goes to the liver and becomes glucose again, and fatty acids move to muscle cells to be used as energy. Fatty acids are made up of carbon, oxygen and hydrogen, so when completely decomposed, they turn into water, carbon dioxide, energy and heat. But, when a large amount of fatty acids are metabolized at once, they are decomposed to the end to become water and carbon dioxide, and a substance called ketone bodies are produced in the middle of the process. The problem is that these ketone bodies are acidic. When ketone bodies are dissolved in water, they release hydrogen ions, so the more ketone bodies are produced, the more hydrogen ions are dissociated and the body fluid becomes more acidic. The increase in ketone body production is due to increased breakdown of fatty acids. Since ketone bodies are produced when fatty acids are metabolized incompletely, an increase in blood ketone bodies indicates an increased breakdown of fatty acids. There are two reasons for the increase in the breakdown of fatty acids. One is that the intake of fat has increased, and the other is that the amount of fat breakdown has increased because of insulin resistance, which means that glucose cannot be used. When the body fluid becomes acidic, various compensation mechanisms to return the pH to neutral are mobilized. As part of the mechanism, the secretion of hydrogen ions from all glands of the human body increases, thereby lowering the pH of the secretion. As a result, the acidity of stomach acid increases, and the pH of pancreatic juice, bile, and small intestine juice, which should be alkaline, decreases, and the acidity of these digestive juices decreases. The acidity of the stomach acid has increased, but the pH of the digestive juice in the small intestine, which is supposed to neutralize acidic chyme, has also decreased. So the chyme that has come down to the small intestine cannot be neutralized and the activity of digestive enzymes in the small intestine slows. As a result, digestion in the small intestine cannot proceed, resulting in congestion. Stomach contents cannot go down to the small intestine, and when abdominal pressure increases, it flows back into the esophagus. Even healthy people can temporarily develop gastroesophageal reflux if they overeat or exercise to increase abdominal pressure. However, in a healthy person, stomach acid is not lower than normal and the normal esophageal mucosa blocks the acid. Esophagitis does not occur. On the other hand, when a lot of acidic food is consumed or a lot of ketone bodies are produced during the metabolic process, the acidity of the stomach acid is stronger than usual, which damages the lower esophageal mucosa and causes acid reflux esophagitis. Metabolic acidosis is the acidification of body fluids due to acids in foods or acids produced during metabolic processes. So the real cause of acid reflux is metabolic acidosis. In this lesson, we learned that the esophageal mucosa has weaker physical and chemical barriers than the gastric mucosa, so when acid reflux occurs, the esophageal mucous membrane is easily damaged. We also learned that if we eat a lot of acidic food or if a lot of acidic substances are generated in the metabolic process, the body fluid becomes acidic, and in order to reverse it, the acidity of the stomach becomes strong and the secretion of gastric acid increases. In the next lesson, we will learn why the number of patients with gastroesophageal reflux disease is rapidly increasing and the correct way to prevent and manage acid reflux. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. This is Real Easy Med Terms. Have a great day. See you again.